We are anonymous. We are not soldiers, not politicians, and not diplomats. We are observers, data miners, analysts, truth-tellers. Our battlefield is information, our weapon is evidence, and our loyalty is to no flag, only to truth itself. Tonight we bring you a story buried beneath the calm waters of the Caribbean, a story that governments would rather whisper about than confront. It is the story of Operation Iron Lantern, one of the most complex and secretive naval anti-drug operations in modern history, and the night the ocean itself decided to speak. It began at 5:30 a.m. The Caribbean was asleep, the sea calm and glassy under the first touch of dawn. Then, without warning, the stillness broke. The horizon erupted in thunder. Radar screens lit up across U.S. destroyers, and Coast Guard ships scattered between the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific. What appeared at first like simple smuggling runs soon unfolded into something far darker. Fleets of high-speed boats darted across the water like insects under searchlights, each one trying to slip past radar coverage, guided by silence, invisibility, and speed. For years, these smugglers had turned the sea into a chessboard, small fast boats against large, heavily armed warships. But on that morning, America was ready. Destroyers had already taken their positions in the deep, supported by P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft, scanning hundreds of miles of ocean with infrared precision. Coast Guard cutters and reconnaissance planes worked in concert, drawing on years of intelligence gathering. Each rule of engagement was carried out with military discipline. First came the warning, then if ignored, the precise strike. Countless operations had played out this way before, ending with seized cargo, shattered boats, and arrests. But this time something felt different. What radar could see was only half the story. What the ocean was hiding, no one could imagine. At 2:35 a.m., on October 14th, 2025, far off Venezuela's northern coast, a U.S. Navy 8. A Poseidon prowled silently across the sky. Its crew had been flying since midnight, scanning the Gulf of Paria for unusual activity. The sea below looked like black glass, empty, still lifeless. Then on the thermal sensors, something appeared, a pulse of heat buried deep inside what looked like a drifting cargo vessel. No running lights, no radio beacon, no transponder. To radar, it looked abandoned, but the thermal feed told a different story. Every 90 minutes, a strong, rhythmic heat spike flickered from the ship's core, steady, mechanical, alive. At first, the crew thought it was an engine malfunction, but the ship's engines were cold. The heat came from somewhere else, somewhere human. Within seconds, the Poseidon's communications officer patched through to the U.S. Coast Guard's Maritime Intelligence Center. Unidentified freighter detected, he reported. No transponder. Possible contraband. Request verification. Minutes later, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Stratton, a 418-foot Legend-class vessel, was rerouted to intercept. Surface radar confirmed the contact, but the ship's ID number traced back to a company dissolved 3 years earlier. Thermal readings showed internal, temperatures exceeding 500 degrees Celsius, impossible for normal cargo machinery. The command came through cold and clear. Maintain silent surveillance. The Poseidon circled high above, its lights darkened while below. The Stratton's crew prepared for a night operation. A small stealth drone, unmanned, infrared-equipped, slipped off the Stratton's deck and skimmed the waves toward the ghost ship. Through its lens, the truth began to surface. Faint shapes, movement, human outlines behind steel cages. The Poseidon's captain whispered what everyone feared to say. This isn't a freighter. It's a prison at sea. At 3:20 a.m., 15 nautical miles east of the Gulf, the first images arrived, grainy, silent, unforgettable. Dozens of faces, terrified, gaunt, trapped behind welded bars. In one compartment, women and children huddled under red emergency lights. In another, 30 captives worked over steaming vats of chemicals, guarded by armed men. It wasn't a smuggling ship. It was a floating drug factory and prison combined. Commander Alvarez aboard the Stratton clenched his jaw. "We've got human lives on board," he said. "This changes everything." Washington was notified. The line went straight to Vice Admiral Nathan Cole, head of U.S. Naval Special Warfare Command. His response was calm, measured, but deadly serious. "We're not facing smugglers," he said. "We're facing an industrial war machine hiding behind human shields. Failure is not an option." Intelligence confirmed at least 80 armed men aboard, equipped with AK-103, PKM machine guns, RPG-7S, and mounted .50 caliber turrets. The cargo bay contained chemical drums, portable power cells, and crates marked with Venezuelan export codes long deleted from registries. The Stratton trailed silently behind, all lights off, every radar ping masked. Above them, the Poseidon circled like a silent witness in the dark. Then came the order. Operation Iron Lantern authorized. Primary mission hostage safety. Secondary neutralize production. The hunters had found their prey. But this would be no ordinary takedown. It was a rescue mission inside a floating inferno. At exactly 1:00 a.m. on October 15th, the air grew heavy. Every man aboard the Stratton stood ready. Up above, the Poseidon locked its cameras on the target. Then, without warning, the sky opened. 40 U.S. drones descended like a swarm of steel hornets. They weren't there to sink the ship. They were there to blind it. The first blast shredded the machine gun nest. The second ripped apart the forward cannon. Flames erupted. Chaos spread across the deck. From the Stratton, small attack boats roared toward the burning freighter. Helicopters thundered overhead. 150 Navy SEALs in black wetsuits gripped their rifles and charged through the dark. They moved like shadows, each man with a mission. Rescue the hostages, destroy the lab, get out alive. At 1:06 a.m., the first breaching charge detonated. Steel split. Gunfire roared. Tracer rounds sliced through smoke as the SEALs flooded the corridors. The air reeked of burning chemicals and cordite. Room by room, deck by deck, they cleared the ship. On the upper level, a cartel fighter raised an RPG, but a drone struck first. The explosion hurled him across the deck. A SEAL dragged him behind cover, checked his pulse, and moved on. No hate, no hesitation, only duty. Down below, 2 SEALs were burned by a burst pipe. They kept moving. One gave the clear signal, the other pressed forward. At 1:14, they reached the prison section. Chains rattled, locks shattered. 53 captives blinked into the blinding light, thin, terrified, trembling. Mothers clutched children. Men wept. For the first time in months, they saw then daylight. By 1:18, it was over. The cartel's fighters lay dead or disarmed. The SEALs stood among fire and twisted steel, exhausted, wounded, but alive. Above them, the Poseidon circled like an angel of justice. Below, the ghost ship drifted, its secret exposed. No one spoke. They just looked at the sea and counted the living. But the night wasn't done. Beneath the wreckage, something worse was waiting. Between 1:30 and 4:00 a.m., as medics ferried the rescued to safety, the SEALs swept the ship compartment by compartment. Behind a false wall, they found a steel-reinforced server room. Encrypted drives, satellite routers, payment ledgers. In the cargo hold, sealed barrels of methylamine and pseudoephedrine. Thousands of crystalline bricks of methamphetamine, stamped with a red insignia, a scorpion encircling a dagger. Commander Alvarez froze. That mark was infamous in intelligence circles. It belonged to Los Escorpiones del Caribe, a Venezuelan syndicate that had evolved from a local cartel into a paramilitary empire. The Stratton's technicians cracked open the data vault. Within minutes, the FBI's cyber forensics team confirmed the unthinkable. The ship was part of a $1.2 billion per quarter global network. The same signatures appeared in earlier seizures from Maracaibo, Barranquilla, and Port of Spain. The syndicate was industrialized, organized, and deeply funded. As dawn approached, survivors burned. Starved, dehydrated, began to speak. They were fishermen from Colombia, Trinidad, and Honduras, kidnapped from coastal villages, forced to cook chemicals under armed watch. Some had watched friends dissolve in chemical vats. The youngest captive was 12. He hadn't seen sunlight in 3 months. By sunrise, the freighter was a floating crime scene. Drones documented every inch. Evidence crates filled the Stratton's deck chemical samples. Digital drives, cartel insignia. Commander Alvarez radioed to headquarters. Primary target neutralized. 53 civilians rescued. Confirmed link to Los Escorpiones del Caribe. Evidence of state complicity. The transmission hung in the air. Somewhere in Washington, men in dark rooms realized what that meant. This wasn't a drug bust. It was exposure. A syndicate operating under the protection of governments. The war had crossed a border. By 6:00 a.m., the Stratton cut through calm seas, towing behind it the broken freighter, a blackened hulk against the gold of dawn. The freed hostages sat wrapped in blankets, silent. Some cried. The SEALs stood guard, too tired to speak. Above, the Poseidon made its final pass, its sensors recording the wreck below. Commander Alvarez looked out at the horizon and said quietly, "The ocean hides everything until it decides to speak." Back in Washington, the data pulled from the ship detonated like a bomb. Analysts worked nonstop, decrypting terabytes of information. What they found redefined the map of organized crime. The ship had been one node in a $5 billion global network run by Los Escorpiones del Caribe, spanning Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, and the Lesser Antilles. Each vessel was a mobile lab shielded by mercenaries and false corporate fronts. Vice Admiral Cole stood before the Joint Task Command and said, "They've blurred the line between crime and state industry. These aren't smugglers. They're a navy of their own, building empires on the backs of the enslaved." Within hours, the United States launched a classified directive, expanded maritime surveillance across the Caribbean corridor, joint FBI-DEA Navy investigation under the same name, Operation Iron Lantern. Arrests followed from Macau to Panama. Bankers, logistics officers, and ex-naval contractors were detained. In Bogotá, the Colombian president called the mission a rescue of not just 53 lives, but the soul of the Caribbean. In Caracas, Venezuela's government denied involvement, but satellite records told the truth. One of the cartel's motherships had departed Puerto Cabo under escort of Venezuelan Coast Guard vessels flying false flags. The evidence was undeniable. By the 17th of October, Iron Lantern had shaken 2 continents. For the world, it became a symbol of something deeper, the convergence of crime, corruption, and politics on the open sea. And yet the real story wasn't just geopolitical. It was human. Those 53 survivors, men, women, children, were proof that courage still exists in a world gone numb. Every sailor aboard the Stratton, every pilot in the Poseidon, every medic who knelt beside the wounded. They proved that heroism doesn't roar. It breathes quietly through discipline, compassion, and faith in something greater than themselves. When dawn fully broke the freighter, once a floating prison became a beacon, smoke rising, sunlight spilling across the shattered decks. It stood as proof that justice can reach even the darkest corners. But this story isn't only about them. It's about us. Because freedom doesn't survive by accident. It survives when people refuse to look away. Evil doesn't vanish. It waits. It adapts. It hides behind flags, corporations, and contracts. And only vigilance keeps the sea from turning dark again. Operation Iron Lantern was more than a mission. It was a message. A reminder that tyranny still sails under familiar colors, that corruption wears uniforms, and that silence can be deadlier than bullets. If you believe the world needs to hear stories like this, stories of courage, sacrifice, and the relentless defense of what's right, then share this video. Speak it, echo it, stand with those who stand, watch in the night. Because somewhere out there, in another black sea, another ship drifts in silence, waiting for the next Iron Lantern to shine. We are anonymous. We do not forget. We do not forgive. We expose what power hides, and we remind the world truth floats, even in the darkest waters.